Good morning and welcome to Behind the Screen. I'm JM. This is a show where we just hang out. We talk about games, things that we love, things that inspire us, things that are fun. And I think that's something I want to keep coming back to is I know I stress beauty quite a bit, but also, right, games are fun. They're a time where we get to hang around with our friends. They're a time where we get to interact and tell stories. And yeah, fun. Now, one of the games that if you have followed our show for any length of time, you know that Iconic Production talks a lot about games maybe off the traditional beaten path. And the game I want to talk about today is I actually picked up a new version of it yesterday while I was running some D&D for kids up at our local game store up in Plano. And I realized I really haven't talked a whole lot about this. And Modiphius's 2D20 system is a fantastic game, especially if you like properties. What do I mean by that? So the 2D20 system runs Conan, Infinity, John Carter of Mars, Dune, Star Trek, among others, and Achtung Cthulhu, the latest version of Modiphius's Call of Cthulhu setting set in World War II. We're going to talk about this on Thursday. It's a little less gritty World War II, kind of the 6th edition rules, and far more Hellboy. It's Hellboy, the role-playing game, if you don't want to be playing the 5th edition version of Hellboy. It is set in World War II. It's very pulpy. It is Nazi super scientists trying to control the mythos versus the stalwart forces of the Allies and their attempts to stop said mythos invasion. But as I said, it powers great games. We had Conan, the Star Trek role-playing game, the Infinity role-playing game. All big, hefty books. And what's interesting to me the most about the 2D20 system is typically we categorize a system on a scale, on a spectrum, if you will, from a rules-light game to a very crunchy game. That doesn't work with the 2D20 system. Because depending on the game that you are playing, if you are playing Infinity or Conan, it's a very robust and crunchy system. It is tactical. It is, character build is very important. You'll have a ton of character options, huge skill lists, a massive line of books. I have 2 bookshelves in the house that are just the Conan and the Infinity line, and I'm still missing a couple of books. But on the other end of the spectrum, you've got John Carter of Mars and Star Trek, where they took the 2D20 system and they parsed it down to its leanest, most rules-light version. In fact, I think John Carter of Mars actually had a conversion so that you could take the Conan rules and beef up your John Carter of Mars. Yes, the Fallout system. Modiphius has turned their house system into one of the best systems for playing in established IPs ever. It's a great system. It plays fast, and depending on your table, you can run it anywhere from a very rules-light, almost narrative-style game, again, Dune, Star Trek, John Carter of Mars, to a robust combat tactical game like Conan or Fallout or Infinity. But at the core, it has to have a good mechanic. If it's going to cover that breadth of games, it's got to have a solid foundation and engine. And I have really fallen in love with the 2D20 system. I've run several campaigns over the years. One of my TPKs was actually an Infinity game. 2 of them were Infinity games, and the group still talks about how great the bank heist that we ran using the Infinity system is. So how does the 2D20 system work? It is what it says on the box. You roll 2D20. Every action that you take in the game is a combination of an attribute or a skill. Is this starting to sound familiar? And But in this case, when you add your attribute and your skill together, that's the number that you need to roll under on 2d20. Each die that comes up equal to or less than your character's attribute plus skill is a success. So let's say we have an agility of 3 and a shooting of 4. Any die that comes up 12 or less on the d20 is a success. Now, successes, there is also a difficulty component. Difficulty is rated from 0 to 5. Difficulty 1 actions are pretty routine. You need one of those 2 dice to come up with success. Difficulty 5 actions are kind of really difficult to do. The rare individual can succeed at a difficulty 5 check. But JM, you may be asking, if I can only roll 2d20, how do I get 5 successes? Well, there's 2 ways. One we're going to talk about briefly, and one we're going to talk about in detail. If you roll a 1, the lowest number you can roll on d20, or in some versions of the game, if you roll under your character's expertise, which basically is a small range of like 1 to 3, that die counts as 2 successes. So, in theory, if both of my d20s came up 1s, I would get 4 successes, but that's still not 5, and the chances of that actually happening are very low. You have meta currency like infinity points in Infinity, fate, or fortune, depending on what game you're playing, where you get to take 1 die out of your die pool and you get to set that die to a 1. But that's a limited resource. The real engine of the game works when you account for something called, depending on the game, Doom in Conan, or Heat in Infinity. This is the GM's metacurrency. And essentially what you can do is at any point before you roll, you can say, hey GM, I would like to buy extra dice. You can buy up to 5 dice, or up to bring your die pool up to a total of 5 dice. You roll them and you get to keep whatever successes you have. But each time you buy dice, you are giving the GM a metacurrency they get to use to make the game more difficult. They get to use it in the same way you get to use your momentum, which we'll talk about in a second. They get to use it to activate environmental effects or change environmental effects. Monsters and threats have heat or doom spells. Now, when we first started playing this game, my players were very, very shy about spending heat to get extra dice. Yes, John, that does only bring you to 4. And the reason that they were shy about it is because it seems counterintuitive. Why would I give the GM something to make the game more difficult later? And the whole 2d20 system really shines when your players buy into this I want to rob Peter to pay Paul mentality. I want to be awesome now. And yes, that may mean it is more difficult in the future, but I can just keep giving the GM more and more rope to be awesome in this moment. Now, if you roll extra successes, those turn into momentum, which is a group pool that kind of acts as a buffer for this GM metacurrency. If I only need 2 successes, but I roll 5, I can either spend the momentum to make my action that much more successful, getting essentially a critical hit, or completing the task in less time, or I can put that in the momentum pool, and then when John Doom goes to roll, he doesn't have to buy extra dice from the GM. He can spend 1 momentum per die that he wants to buy. And so when the system gets going, if your characters are really successful, then you don't have to buy as many dice from the GM. And that's it. That's basically the 2d20 system. It's a 2d20 roll under system. Your target numbers are always based off of how good your character is at something. The target number doesn't change. The difficulty number, how many dice need to come up successful, that is what changes. Oh, nice. James, good luck, man. The other interesting thing that it does is values are very low. You don't need a ton of damage to take out a character. So the way this works is damage is weird. I'm just going to toss that out there. This is probably the thing that takes the most time to get your head around. Damage is fixed plus a certain number of effect dice. And effect dice are a d6. And on a 1, you do 1 extra point of damage. On a 2, you do 2 extra points of damage. On a 3, 4, or 5, you don't do anything. And on a 6, you generate 1 damage and your weapon's special effect. So, let's pull up a example for this from the Infinity game. Adversaries, gear. So let's say John Doom is in a fight with a street gang of motorcyclists from the Japanese sectorial army, like you do. And he's decided to use his multi-rifle. You may be asking what any of that is. If you've never played Infinity, I highly recommend both the miniature game and the role-playing game. Let me find my charts. Should have put a... You're not going to make this easy on me, book, are you? There we go. 360. I went too far. All right, so his multi-rifle does 1 point of damage plus 5 effect dice. So if his effect dice all come up 2, he's done 11 points of damage, probably killing the motorcycle ganger. However, every 6 he rolls allows him to spend it on qualities. Maybe it's, the one that it shows is what's called vicious. And vicious just says every effect does extra damage equal to the vicious rating. So it allows for small damage. You're never going to be in a situation like you are in, say, a regular D20 game, where, excuse me, you are having to do hundreds, or if you're playing 13th Age, 1,000 points of damage. Damage numbers are always low. Characters have, like a robust tag may have 20 to 40 hit points total. But each weapon is a combination of its base damage and its qualities that you then get to trigger with special effects. And sometimes you'll have multiple different effects, and you may need to choose in the moment which effects are best for your character against that target. Another thing I really like about this game is it uses zone combat. So combat is not measured in squares. Movement is not measured in inches or feet or meters. Each area of the battlefield is its own distinct piece, its own discrete piece. So if you're in a marketplace, maybe you have, hey, these stalls over here are one zone, and this narrow alleyway is a second zone, and the rooftops are a third zone, and the loading and unloading docks are a fourth zone. And as the GM, I get to say, all right, I'm going to assign different qualities to each of these things that affect the player's movement, acrobatics, cover, what's around them that they can use to engage with the terrain. And then everything is measured in zones. A rifle may be able to shoot 3 zones away, while a pistol can only be used in the same zone, and obviously a melee weapon is only used if you're in the same zone and right up against the other person. Most characters can move anywhere in their zone on their turn, or take a move action to move to an adjacent zone, or run 3 zones, for example. The obligatory basketball reference from John Doom. I appreciate it. So, that's my overview of the 2D20 system. It's very easy to explain. And one of the nice things is it's a game that the one mechanic covers a breadth of different experiences. Planetary romance with John Carter of Mars. Sword and sorcery if you can get your hands on the old Conan books. High-tech transhuman espionage in Infinity. Boldly going where no one has gone before in Star Trek. Exploring a post-apocalyptic wasteland while you chug down nuke cola in Fallout. All of these use the exact same rule system. I'm really hoping that Modiphius puts out a Elder Scrolls 2D20 system, because they've got the Elder Scrolls miniature game, much like they had the Fallout miniature game, and now they've got the Fallout role-playing game. I'm really hoping that they do a Tamriel game. One system that moves all the way through all of those games. But they do a great job at Modiphius of taking the base chassis and expanding on it or focusing it for each of the different games. So, for example, everything I said about combat is true in Conan and Infinity and Fallout. But Infinity requires, it's an espionage, high-tech espionage game. So they took the zone combat rules and they applied it to 2 additional arenas of conflict. You have a section on PSYOP rules for moving between social networks to get at the people you need or infect the social networks with an idea. They also have InfoWar, which is basically their hacking rules. And each area of the server is a zone that allows the hacker to move from where they're at to maybe a public terminal to, through the firewall of the Hypercorp and then through the various server zones. And what's nice about this is no matter what type of combat I'm running in Infinity, the rules basically stay the same. They're not multiple subsystems that each have their own unique way of attacking things. It's much like Savage Worlds in the fact that hacking can be run as a quick encounter or a dramatic task, and it's not really, or a single skill roll. It's not really asking you to learn a whole new subsystem. And yes, Mark is right. The quality of the books are fantastic. The art, the binding, the writing, the supplements that they put out, all top-notch. If you want to throw yourself into a line, which I always enjoy doing, Modiphius is a great company to support. They have, Conan, I think, is out of print now, which makes getting those last 2 or 3 books very difficult. Infinity is still going on, but I think there's still one book I don't have, the Nomads book. It's very difficult to find, but you can still get these books. Star Trek is still going on. Dune has just released. Fallout has just released. If you enjoy supporting a single game line and want to have all of the things, Modiphius won't leave you hanging. So John Doom says, what you're saying is if someone makes a Savage mod for Modiphius, they'll have... Yes, exactly. Yes, the Star Trek Adventure books are gorgeous. They're a little bit more expensive than the regular ones, and I think that's because, they're printed to look like pads from Star Trek. So it's all color on black ink or color on black paper, and it makes it very unique and very thematic. You feel like you're just reading through a data pad. And they've got, again, if you want to throw yourself into Star Trek, they have original, TNG, Deep Space Nine. They've got all 4 quadrant books out. They've got a rule book for playing as Klingons if you want to run a Klingon Empire game. They put out I don't know if you can still get it, but they had a Borg Cube edition that was a giant Borg cube that opened up that had all of the minis and the tokens and the maps and the books and the GM screen. Also, they put out miniatures for all of their game lines, and the minis are pretty slick. The Star Trek ones are great. Obviously, the Fallout ones you can use with their miniature game or with their role-playing game. Great company. Always love seeing them at conventions. if you're looking for something new to try, and any of those settings sound interesting, I can promise you, you're going to get a unique experience playing 2D20. Especially if you can encourage your players to buy into the idea that they need to rob Peter to pay Paul. They need to give the GM extra tokens so that their character can be awesome now. Yeah, the Elcar's pads. Well done. Have a Benny, John. And I realize you're running our game on Friday. And so, yes, I'm giving you a Benny for that game. Nerds. So that's it for today. I just wanted to share my love for a great gaming system and a great gaming company. I put all of the notes in the, all the links to the PDFs in the show notes. And Thursday, before I head to North Texas RPG Con, we're going to talk about the starter set for Achtung Cthulhu. I was always a big fan of Achtung Cthulhu back in its Call of Cthulhu days. And John Doom said that there might have been a Savage Worlds Achtung Cthulhu. I never saw that. But this is their 2D20, and they're really pushing kind of the pulp aspect. In fact, all of the books, you can see this one says special issue. All of the books are numbered like an old pulp magazine. Player's Guide is number 1, GM's Guide is number 2, and then the adventures are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It adds to the very pulp World War II feeling. So, I did give the GM a Benny. And he's only going to use it against you, Tink. So perfect. I get all of the benefits for being generous and none of the risk. Love it. So that's it. That's been Behind the Screen. I'm JM. Until next time, stay safe, stay gaming, stay healthy. I will see you all on Thursday. And until then, have a good one.